What's going on, folks? And we're back. Seeing live and joining me is Bob Owens from Bearing Arms. And before we cut to break, we were I mentioned something about some of the protests and the things that have been happening in response to Trump's election. Mainly this. Let's run this clip. That was an image of some of the protests that basically were happening around the country as of yesterday in response to Donald Trump winning the election. So, Bob, were things quiet on your end, or were they pretty noisy?
Well, I live in a suburb of Raleigh, so I think around where we are, it was fairly tame. We're a bedroom community, but it's still rural. It used to be a farm town. And so it was pretty tame here. We did have the one neighbor down the street who got kind of hysteric when she saw things going south for her candidate. The one lady who had the "Ready for Hillary" sticker on her car. Everybody else, though, was pretty mellow. And this entire election was pretty mellow where we are. We did not have folks with signs up everywhere, at least not for the national candidates. It was pretty much school board type stuff is what we saw.
Gotcha.
So the national freakout that we're seeing in a handful of large cities just doesn't seem to be happening in the red states, at least not where I'm seeing it.
Yeah, I didn't even realize we were going to have protests like that here in Dallas until I left last night. It was one of those nights where I actually had to end up going to the gym pretty late. And as I was driving, the protest was actually just starting, and there's just like this massive bodies yelling and walking down the street. And it was relatively peaceful, for at least from what I could see. However, I did see some footage on the news that weren't really that peaceful. My response to it, I feel the protests are a bit juvenile.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment of it.
I feel it is an aggregation of it's an aggregate of people throwing a massive temper tantrum. I've seen protests done correctly. I've seen them done in a way that I thought was effective. I largely think that this was a bunch of people who were just upset, yelling and screaming that things didn't go their way, which is pretty conducive to the way that I see a lot of how this country has been geared. As of late. I feel like we're kind of cultivating an environment in this country where we have an expectation that things always go our way, and when they don't, raise hell. I was brought up differently. I'm in a awkward position in that I'm in a bit of two different generations. I'm part of Generation X, basically kids raised by parents who were baby boomers, but also grew up in the millennials. And so I have a very kind of yin and yang when it comes to the way I approach life. When they said Generation X was just going to be the worst generation of all. We were a bunch of rebellious teens who didn't strive to be anything in life. But at the same time, I was actually taught, when you don't get what you want, you figure out a way, you work hard and to get it. It's one of those things where you really sit down, and the only person you can blame is yourself in many ways. And I don't know. It didn't click with me. It's not something that I could have looked at, and even from my perspective, who tends to try to be objective and see both sides of each position, I just didn't see it here. I just largely saw a bunch of crying and screaming.
Yeah, and I don't even know if it's fair to say that this is necessarily a generational gap as much as it is a cultural gap. Okay. We have folks that are brought up, regardless of age, to put in the hard work if you want something. Put in that sweat equity. Get an education. Work hard, and then luck will happen to you. Yeah. Luck's nothing more than hard work most of the time. Yeah. And yet we've got these helicopter parents now that are Lord, hanging over their kids, who won't allow them to fail
Yep.
in anything they do. And then the first time they encounter real disappointment and mommy or daddy are not around,
They can't handle
they've
it.
never experienced failure. They don't know how to rise above it. And as you said, temper tantrum, because that's what they default to, because they've never had to deal with failure. And we're watching a bunch of folks who have never fail spectacularly. And it's a really amusing and sad thing to watch at the same time.
I mean, because think about it from a global perspective. I say this all the time. From a global perspective, what do we think is out there? They're not sheep. We're dealing with wolves. Like this is not something where it's just kind of like Care Bears and pink clouds and all of these fairy tales nonsense. Like, I mean, my mother used to get mad at me when I would just get down on myself because I didn't accomplish something. And kind of what it ingrained in me was that if I fail at something, no one's going to feel sorry for you. Just pick yourself up, fix it, and get back on it. Like that's kind of the way I was brought up. And like you said, I think we've gone the complete opposite direction, or starting to. There's a part of the culture that's starting to go that direction where, and I've watched it. I watched it in school growing up when I was going through law school and things like that. They just could not handle failing at anything. And it wasn't because they were exceptional and that everything they did in life was just awesome and then they had this one moment where they just weren't exceptional and then they failed. No, I mean, they were pretty normal people. They just, like you said, they just been kind of shielded throughout the entire life. So then when things go bad, they just lose it and they don't know what to do.
Yeah, and sadly, it's going to weigh down our politics even more as we move forward. And it's, everybody keeps joking about idiocracy. But that's kind of the way we're headed. We've got folks who don't know anything, who have overinflated opinions of themselves, who then are just flattened when they hit the real world. It's like playing, human Frogger.
Yeah.
And they're coming out here and getting absolutely crushed when mommy and daddy aren't around to shield them from everything.
Yep.
And it's I feel really sorry for them, but at the same time, we have very sheltered lives here in the United States. But that shelter came from hard men and women going out there and working really hard so that their grandkids and their kids wouldn't have to work quite as hard.
They almost kind of worked too hard in many ways.
They really kind of did. They sheltered us to the point where we really don't want for anything. Yeah. We're the only culture in world history where people in poverty have an obesity problem.
I'd never thought about that. That is very interesting.
So, we've got a very coddled culture, a very spoiled culture that's not used to working for much. And so when they fail, it's brutal for everybody concerned. And that's where we're seeing this mass freak out and these temper tantrums.
I think
that's what these protests are.
I think also we're suffering from what I like to call headline intelligence. Mm-hmm. And you probably won't really be able to relate to this because I'm pretty sure you are responsible for putting titles on articles and things of that nature. You can only fit so much information in a title, right? And then I'm not writing this article so nobody reads it. So I'm going to have to title the article in such a way to get you to read the article. But the problem is what I'm noticing in this generation, especially, I'm just going to call it the Instagram generation, and I'm part of it. The only problem with that is what you're getting now is you get the scroll effect. It's like you read a headline and you think you know everything just from reading that headline. And you read the story, like you were talking about context before. You need to continue reading to understand the context so that you better understand what you thought you knew. And we're not getting that. So then what ends up happening is you have these people who are half educated on a subject and, like you said, think they know way more than they really do. And then they go out there and start running their mouths or making decisions based on that. And then we're stuck sitting here like, wait a minute, that doesn't make any sense. So now we have to re-educate just so that you don't go off the deep end and make a stupid decision that's counterintuitive to your benefit. And it's just a lot of just mess lobbed in together. And I don't really know what to blame, who to blame. I'm not above reproach. I'm probably sure I'm facilitating some aspects of it. But nonetheless, I think as long as we're conscious of it, we should be doing something that actively tries to prevent that.
We've got a culture of the now. Everybody wants everything quick and easy. Yeah, your background, your mom wanted you to read books.
Yeah.
You read books, you learn things.
Yeah.
and it's not it's not like flipping, through your smartphone and just reading a tweet. You're getting depth.
Yep.
And so many folks today don't have a lot of depth to them. You start talking to folks about issues, and they're like, "You're really smart," and I'm like,
No, I just
kind of did. That's the way I was brought up. You read books to learn things.
Yeah,
and it seems to be a foreign concept to people these days. So we've got a lot of people who know everything there is to know about the Kardashians.
Mm-hmm.
But you ask them anything about why we have an electoral college and a popular vote, and they're going to look at you like a horn just grew right out of the middle of your forehead.
Yep, absolutely. Absolutely. Speaking of the Kardashians, I'm actually going to be talking about them this next segment. But we are out of time, man. I got to throw it to break. But, man, it was a pleasure speaking with you, Bob. I look forward to having you on the show again, man. Don't be a stranger.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. You have a good one, man.
All right. Take care.
All right. And when we come back, I'm going to talk about the Kardashians.